So firstly, I mean, we've all heard the story now and told in a few different ways. But why do you all think it has inspired so many adaptations? You know, the early film and then the book and then the musical and then another film. What is it about the story, like at the heart? You've probably all covered it in some ways in your speeches tonight as well. But what is it that you think has really gripped people about it in like a nutshell? Maybe if we could ask Tash first, and then if anyone else wants to jump in as well.
I think it's a combination of the fact that it's exactly the spy story that you want to exist. Spy stories are great at the best, like they're just fascinating. Everyone just wants to believe that there's an underworld of strangers in lovely hats and great suits that are going around making decisions. But you want those spy stories to be ridiculous and filled with insane things that never could have happened. And also, but at the heart, they're sort of done by this amazingly small group of people who've made a huge difference. And I think all of us, I think that for me at least, why it has such resonance is it awakens that thing that kind of goes, maybe I can do something incredible. Maybe I don't, maybe this stuff is up to me. Maybe if I have a team and a mad idea and I just believe it to the end, I can change something. And I think that's a story that people really want to believe is true. And in this case, it is.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I do think the fact that it is a true story because, you know, and we've all seen all these sort of improbable spy story films with people doing stunts that you think, you know, like, come on. But the fact that this is actually based in something that really did happen does make a huge difference because, as Tash said, but, you know, you might quibble with some of the details and some of the Hollywoodization or dramatization, but at the essence, it is something that actually did happen, and yeah, and obviously for us, you know, we know who did it. So you know, the fact, as Rachel said, that you know, this was a story that we grew up with, and also, I mean, I think one of the other things, of course, is the fact that it's a story lots of people have grown up with. You know, the fact that Grandpa was able to get in first. You know, because there weren't, as Rachel said, he was given special permission to reveal the story at a time when other stories from the Second World War simply weren't able to be talked about. So it's something, you know, because the film The Man Who Never Was crops up on TV with at least once a year, and so people do know the story and are quite happy to hear it again and again and again.
How did he feel about the portrayal on film in The Man Who Never Was? Did he like seeing himself portrayed in that way? Did he feel it was kind of true to what happened? And do you think he would have liked the musical version of himself, especially played by a woman? Do you think he would have had anything to say about the new take?
I think he'd have loved the musical version, and I think he'd have loved Tash's performance. He was glad that the film was happening. It meant that everybody was, you know, it would get even wider circulation than the book. As Sarah says, every insomniac in the country has probably seen the film at least once. And but he hated the way he was portrayed by Clifton Webb. I remember him saying, so nasty to his staff. You'll never get anybody to work for you if you talk to them like that. And I mean, they really did work their guts out for really long hours. So he felt that the way that Clifton Webb behaved, the way people around him, no. Whereas one of the things that I think is a real strength of the musical is exactly as Tash said, you made it fun. And Grandpa was fun. He was the most wonderful company. You know, the hours I spent with him, he was wonderful to be with, enormously entertaining. And the way that you brought across in the way that you did it, both the extent to which he was fun, the way in which, yes, they slogged their guts out, doing all this, working the most unreasonable and unhealthy hours in the most unreasonable and unhealthy place. Anybody who walks across Horse Cars Parade can look at that great chunk of concrete. Grandpa was also very tall and the ceilings there were very low. It was not, you know, current health and safety, forget it. But because they were such a close and cooperative team, and that was exactly what the musical conveys in a way that I think is really impressive. So no, I think
Rachel.
you really, you know, when you talked about picking something of him up, I think that you really did manage to get that across. as Sarah said, it was about the only thing that came out before other people, and people are proud of the fact that we won the Second World War. I mean, the other thing, Tash, when you talk about just what a scary time we've lived through the last few years, it was one of the things I remember Grandpa saying constantly, that, to us born after the Second World War, we know we won it. During the time, they didn't know that they were going to win it, and a lot of the time it looked very likely that they might not.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's I think that not that there's any real benefit to having this terrible time, but I think the levity of that, and of going through something where you feel a bit like it's nothing in comparison to the Second War, obviously, but that that feeling of unknowingness and feeling that responsibility in that way of this is on us, and what do we do about it? And I think as you talk about the film portrayal is interesting, because I remember watching The Man Who Never Was and feeling a bit like, I just don't think it's not really recognizing the person who had written all the letters, and that I read about in Ben McIntyre's book, who was just so funny and charming, and sort of he was such a got things done and pushed things through and didn't take no for an answer, but always was the sort of there with his team, and it was all of them together. So I'm really I'm delighted that comes across, because it was really important to us, and to me particularly, obviously, that we showcased just how important that was.
Mm. Yeah, because it's one of the things that I really liked in the musical was the. I mean, obviously, what they were doing was a serious endeavour. They knew that it was crucial to winning the war, and they knew that they had to make things credible, and all the rest of it. But at the same time, I remember it in the documentary that Ben McIntyre did about his book Operation Mincemeat. They interviewed my father, Jeremy, and one of the things that my dad said was how much he and his team enjoyed fooling the Germans to the top of their bent. The fact that they had sort of devious and lateral thinking minds and could come up with all of these schemes in order to sort of defeat the fact that the Germans thought in straight lines. And the number that you have in the musical, God, that's brilliant. But listen to this, where they all come up with one scheme after another. Just that creativity and fertility of mind that they had to come up with all these different ideas that some of which might work, some of which might not, but were all directed towards that end. But even though it was a serious endeavour, they had they had a really interesting time doing it and bringing all that about. So yes, that's one of the things that as Rachel says, that I think Grandpa would really have enjoyed the musical from that point of view. That it clearly conveyed that.
So I have a question for Tash about the early points of the adaptation. You've talked about how the family feel about the adaptation. I'm just wondering whether you were aware of the story as something like a recent history, that people descended from Ewan Montagu were around, or like, did you feel close to the story, or did it feel like a past history that was quite far away?
It's both of those things completely, in that it's a very strange thing because obviously when you're writing something for stage, you have to think of things in terms of like the sort of theatre maths of it, of dramatic arc, and what pacing, what needs to happen in order for things to sort of land, and in that way you end up sort of feeling as though this is a story that exists in a vacuum that you get to manipulate. But also at the end of every of those conversations you come back to, but this is real and it happened, and these people, as you say, it's recent history. And I think we hoped a lot that it was good, because we knew that the fact that the Montagues had heard of it and were gonna come and see it, and we really wanted you guys to come, but we wanted it to do it justice. We were very worried that because it was our first musical, and we were sort of figuring things out as we went. We just hoped that you sort of saw at the core of it that we were trying to kind of get across our love and our passion for the story, as well as sort of taking liberties and changing bits along the way, and taking the piss out of the establishment and all the rest of it. So I think we had faith that the people who descended from Ewan Montague would see all that and they would get it and get on board. But it was still scary, obviously. But it elevated the joy of the project to be able to meet these people and see the letters and see photographs and, you know, Rachel bringing along stuff. Like it was impactful in a way that I've never sort of had of making a theatre production before, and I don't know now. I was talking the way, I don't know if I could go back to not writing truthful stories for stage anymore, because it really has been so enriching to kind of have that angle as part of it.
Thank you. So I have a couple more questions, and then I will hand over to the audience who have also put in some interesting things in the chat. Firstly, when I first approached Natasha, she was a little bit nervous about speaking to a Jewish audience, because the show doesn't necessarily bring out, you know, any Jewish themes in what happened. I was just wondering whether, for Rachel and Sarah, whether Jewishness and Judaism from your perspective, did they play a part in your grandpa's involvement in Operation Mincemeat and in his role in the war in general? Like, did he see it as important, like as a British person, as a Jewish person? Like, did it come into it at all?
I think one of the things, I mean, it's a bit difficult for a Jewish person to say they had a wonderful time during World War II. I think there was a slight element of guilt there. There was some very real fear. I mean, one of the things that, you know, that letter that I put up, it says several times, if I'm killed, none of us know. There's another letter where, okay, you know, up in Hull, in fact, he was relatively safe. Once he comes back to London and the Blitz, he says things like, oh, yes, you know, the Blitz, people are being bombed, but not everybody gets bombed every night, you know. So, you know, I mean, there were sort of different levels of fear about it. I think one of the things that on a more serious level absolutely underlay everything he did in his life, his choice of the law as a career. One of the things I bitterly regret, during his last illness, he had about 6 months with liver cancer, so time to say goodbye and to reminisce. He talked a lot about how when he was working as a judge, one of the things he was known for as a judge was he was good at spotting the moment when a professional criminal might be ready to turn, or somebody who ran an absolutely brilliant approved school heard him speak and said, I'll keep a place for you. Anyone you think really ought to be in my place, I'll keep a place, you can send them. One of the things my father said is that he found after Grandpa died, he corresponded with people he'd tried in courts for years. So I think justice and actually making things right in the world, tikkun olam, actually was an underlying passion. And if winning the Second World War wasn't a part of making the world come right, I don't know what was. So anything that he did that was in any way a contribution to that, I think was really important to him.
My last question then is, how do you all feel about the response to the show? So as a performer, and then also as, you know, family members watching people respond to your family history on stage, how does that feel?
Yes, it's interesting. I suppose Tash is right that the film was that bit more distant, wasn't it? I don't think I ever felt quite that strong sense of family there. I mean, I was very aware of the things in the first film that were accurate and the films that weren't, you know, when I heard about it as a child. I suppose it did feel much closer seeing the musical, because perhaps of the extra sort of sense in which, yes, they'd connected to the sense of these being real people really trying to do something. I think it does feel quite strange, the idea that bits of sort of family stuff then come out. I think something Sarah and I both said about going to the film set to watch the new film being made is it felt rather strange. You know, Colin Firth, everybody loves Colin Firth, playing somebody who I also loved very much as a grandfather. And there's a sort of really interesting element of sort of cognitive dissonance there.
From my perspective, yeah, it's been very overwhelming in a really lovely way, just to see people coming out. And I think there's a couple of things that are really great about it. There's one coming out and people being like, but is that vaguely true? Like, you know, you must have invented this bit. This can't have happened. That didn't. And basically, we really, in terms of sort of things that happened, events, we really haven't, in any of the crazy stuff took directly from the actual events of of the mission, and sort of being able to be like, no, yeah, it did, and actually it was crazier than that. We had to take it out because it was so mental that I didn't even, you don't even know about these, these 17 things that were in a first iteration we had to pull out. It's like, oh god, no one's going to believe there was a war magician called Jasper Maskelyne. Forget that. We're going to get rid of that. And like, there's so many facets that we would have loved to have poured in, and so sort of lighting people being like, I just can't believe that. Like that feels really good. And I think the other thing, and I think I sort of been thinking about like why it feels like this show, feels so, but important to us and important, and has been hopefully impactful to audiences, is that I think because it's a story about a small group of people trying to do something big. And also it's a full-scale musical, except there's just 5 of us, and we're trying to give you this, hugely epic, round the world story, and do an entire show, big show-stopping musical. There's only 5 of us on stage. I think the tandemness of that, I feel like we get a lot of good grace from audiences, and audiences kind of come with us and kind of go, they're trying to do something stupid, you're trying to do something stupid, let's just have a stupid old time. And I think, there's something in that sort of strengthens the core, and people just really want us to succeed as performers. They want the mission to succeed, and they're all sort of coming together at the end. I think just makes people feel really feel empowered and good.
And Sarah, did you have any last thoughts on how it feels to see people respond to it?
Yeah, it's I think as Rachel says, yes, it's that because obviously Grandpa was Grandpa, and sort of seeing him as his grandchild, that he is that person, but then also to reflect that he had this role that was really important. Because I was telling one of my friends in Oxford about it, and he was saying to someone else who was there, when she says that, he was really important. You know what I mean? It's very hard to sort of put the two sides together. But so it was hugely enjoyable to see this someone else's take on the person that we knew so well, and of course having Tash portray Grandpa, because Tash clearly isn't Grandpa, but at the same time she was. So it was a wonderful sort of step beyond the reality. Yeah.
I think when you came in, Sarah, I can't now remember whether it was Rachel or you, Sarah. Somebody opened the door, and because you came to see the musical, and we'd done it, and I knew that you were in, and I was so nervous because oh my god, I really hope that they see that we love this man and but I was just so stressed about it, and we kind of finished the show and like went over to the bar, and it was, I'm so sorry, I can't remember if it was Rachel or Sarah. You opened the door and just said Grandpa.
Yes.
I remember that so clearly, and just like being sort of in this embrace with you, and it was just one of the best moments of my life. I think I just I was so moving, having all that anxiety, and been like, I really hope that they that we've not done a disservice. To have that reaction was just very funny, and also very good fun.
My Aunt Jennifer too. I remember when we had a photograph taken all together, my Aunt Jennifer said, "Must stand next to my daddy." So, you have all these. That's right.
It was really
children wonderful. You have all these children and grandchildren so much older than you are.
I know. My family's so much bigger than I ever could have realized.
You ever knew.
And just to point out, this is Jennifer, so welcome. So this is the daughter of Ewan Montague, so welcome as well to this conversation. I'm very pleased to have brought you all back into the same virtual space together. So I think, thank you for all your responses to my questions. Now we have a few more from the audience. So can I ask Angela Gluck to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much, Emma. Thank to all of you, to Rachel, whom I know, and to Tash and to Sarah. So I'm afraid my question is nothing like as light and as fun as this, but and it's really quite a serious question. So I'm not one of those people who sees the film every year, but I do remember seeing it in the cinema in 1956 with my parents and being utterly captivated by this. But one of the things that caused me great anxiety was not, will the body not land on the shore, or will the suitcase, the briefcase fall off, but it was the visit of Patrick O'Reilly to Lucy Sherwood's flat. This is to check out whether the fiancé is bona fides, right? Whether it really is. And I'm panic stricken because I know it, I understood enough to realize that this is really phony. And what now is going to happen? The whole thing's going to collapse, and we'll lose the war and everything, even though we'd already won it because it was 1956. But anyway, and then of course her fiance has died, I think that day, or she had the news that day, or very very recently, and so she's in a drunken sort of grief-stricken stupor, and then that convinces him, more or less convinces him, and it seemed like. So as a child, I thought, oh, that's all right then, because it sort of worked. But it seems like such a coincidence, and I have no idea whether there's any factual basis to this. No, there isn't. So there's no visit to Lucy Sherwood. There is a Lucy Sherwood, right? But she's called something else, yes?
No.
Yeah, sort of a Lucy Sherwood. Okay.
Sort of.
But there's no visit by Patrick O'Reilly to Lucy Sherwood.
No, I mean, there's one of the things that I think, so when I said as a child I was aware of which bits of the film were true and which wasn't, exactly. It's very interesting. So I think yours is quite a common reaction. I've had other people say to me, you're in The Irishman and so on. British intelligence had mopped up any spies the Germans sent. They were aware from their monitoring of German intelligence signals that the only stuff that was coming through was stuff that they themselves had provided.
Yeah.
And so, there weren't, therefore, spies like that coming in. I mean, even if exactly somebody coming in from Ireland, a hem neutral and so on would be quite a good way of constructing that. It wasn't there. And yes, that's right. It's a beautiful piece of film writing, as you say, that her grief about her dead fiancé appears just in time to convince the Irishman that, yes, indeed, somebody really has got lost. But take it as a wonderful piece of film writing.
Thank you.
And the next question comes from Morris Hoffman, who has his hand up. So I'm just going to add you. And can I ask you to unmute, Morris?
I remember seeing a musical. I think it was Operation Mincemeat at a theatre near Euston Square.
That was.
It was quite a. I forget. It was the theatre under an office block.
Yeah, the new diorama.
Yes, and was that the musical that you're referring to, or was it?
Yes.
Because I mean, the great thing about it is not only what they did. If you wrote it as fiction, no one would believe it, but also getting into the Nazi mind of what they would do when they found this body and all the documents. They the way they plotted it out, what they thought would happen, and it did happen. I think that was out. They made all these assumptions and gaming, which could have gone wrong. Anyway, I did enjoy it. It was a very small theatre, and we were almost in sort of row D or row E, and it was a special performance for those elderly people in the grey vote.
If you saw it at the new diorama, then you're one of their earliest fans.
Yeah, you will have seen that was us, I'm afraid. Yeah, that was that. You will have seen me
3-4 years ago, something like
2019 it was. We did a 5-week run
lockdown.
There. Yeah.
Anyway, so we enjoyed it, and if it reads like fiction, but it isn't.
Yeah, that's the best part about it. Absolutely. Yeah, we love it. We love it for that reason.
There's nothing Jewish about it at all. You saw it as a story.
Grandpa.
And that was it. That was fine. Great. Was it Greece they pretended they were going to land at? Was it Greece?
Yes.
Sardinia.
Sardinia.
Sardinia is not Greece. Sardinia's. I thought they mentioned Greece, but if it was Sardinia,
both. Yeah.
It's
okay.
Greece in the film. It's Greece in the film.
All
But
right.
it isn't Greece, it's Sardinia.
Well, no,
So
it was
that's-
both. They were both flagged as targets. There was a joke in one of the letters. This is the sort of thing I think I meant when I said, grandpa's, or yes, the gift for putting themselves into the German mind, without descending as far as stereotypical jokes about the German sense of humour. A joke about bringing sardines there on rations here. That was put into one of the letters that Major Martin was carrying, and that was one of the ones that was copied to the Germans. And yes, Tash mentioned how the Germans liked these documents they got. It was a joke designed to appeal to their sense of humour, and it did. So Sardinia was part of it, but Greece was part of it too. Jenny, I think, had a wonderful story about Greece. Jenny, do you want to come back in here? You mentioned a German friend of yours.
Anyway, thanks a lot.
Can I come in here briefly? We've always thought of the story of how marvelous for England and Britain we won the war and all the rest of it. And I have a German friend of my father's generation who told me one day, your father saved my life, because he'd been stationed in Sicily and was sent off to Greece, where he had a lovely time doing absolutely nothing. All the Germans left in Sicily were slaughtered. And so, I mean, it's interesting to see it from their side as well as ours. One point I'd like to make, I would like to say how much I enjoyed the musical. And I went there expecting to hate every minute of it. The idea of making it a musical, the idea of a woman acting as my father, I went there full of skepticism. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thought you did it brilliantly.
Oh, that's the best possible way round to do it. At least it's not going in hopeful and coming out devastated. So I'm very happy that we changed your mind. It means a lot to us. Thank you.
A minor correction.
I've got another question.
The decision to ask my father to write it up was because the Duff Cooper's book made the British intelligence look stupid. It wasn't so much that, it was a highly intelligent journalist who had read Duff Cooper's book. And when Rommel's diaries came out and he saw that there really had been a corpse washed up, he started investigating. And what the British intelligence people wanted to do was to stop him finding out more than they wanted him to find out. And so they asked my father to write this book just to stop him investigating further.
I think that does lead on to Suzanne Korn's question. I'm just going to invite Suzanne, if you could unmute and ask your question.
Hi, everybody. I was just wondering if after the war there was any reaction from the German side about how they felt, how they'd been taken in, or do we have any idea of what they were thinking of the time, looking back, if that makes sense?
Anyone like to take that one?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer.
Yeah. I mean, I know the bit that in Ben McIntyre's feeling from having looked at some of this documentation from the German side is that some of the reaction, or not reaction to it, but that at least some of the people who passed stuff on from the German side were actually people who were not unanimously in favour of Hitler, and were actually quite keen to undermine the German war effort themselves. So some of the stuff genuinely deceived the Germans, but some of the stuff there's at least an impression or feeling that that people were almost willingly being deceived, as it were. Letting themselves be taken in so that they could, so that the deception would pass through. after the war, I'm not aware of any detailed stuff about what the Germans, like whether the Germans were like a duh or anything of that sort. I don't know.
Oh, thank you.
Feel for.
I mean, this is a question for Germany, isn't it? Is precisely.
It is.
I mean, yes, this is a sort of whole other topic, but Germans only born after the war, but saying how guilty they feel about the whole thing. So I have a feeling that the years immediately after the war, people willing to stand up and defend what any form of the German military system had done during the war were a bit thin on the ground.
Yes.
Okay, I have one final question, and that is from Colin Ford, and then I'll hand back to Aviva.
Unmute me. It's actually from Sue Grayson Ford, but I'm not posing as a man. But what I wanted to ask was to what extent the Montagues have been involved with the new film, and whether they were called on as consultants, which would have been very worthwhile for the filmmakers, or whether they just went to see the rushes or whatever. Were you consultants? Have you formally been involved?
We saw the script. We were invited to comment. Some of our comments were taken on board.
Only in fairly minor directions, I would say.
I think that's a fair comment, yes.
What a shame, what a missed opportunity. Don't you think?
I suppose it depends what you're aiming to do with the film.
Well, for it to be accurate, to tell the story properly, maybe.
No, it wasn't a question of accuracy. They were making a film in which they had to have romance, which wasn't there. They had to have a spy, which wasn't there. I mean, to make it into an exciting film for other people is very different from making a documentary.
Yeah, it's true.
They were justified. I mean, we may not have liked it because it falsifies certain things, but I think it makes a much better film probably than doing it as a straightforward, truthful, absolutely truthful documentary. You can always read Ben McIntyre's book or my father's book and get the actual story. But I think that the film, rather like the musical, I mean, it has to stick to the basic things, but it can add things in and make it more exciting or more interesting to the ordinary audience.
So you would recommend that we see the film, the new film?
I would certainly,
yes.
I think, recommend very strongly that people read Grandpa's books, because I think Ben McIntyre's book, it's a long, quite serious book with a lot of historical development. It's a wonderful book to read. Grandpa's books, though, if anybody only has limited time, Grandpa's books, they were written fast, and they also are a very quick and lively read. So I'd very strongly recommend anybody who wants to find more about the story after tonight to find Grandpa's book, if I'm allowed a sort of, yes, commercial break. It's been an otherwise very high-minded evening session.
You're allowed to plug the books. Tash is very much allowed to plug the new run of the show in January. If you want to say what the dates are very quickly.
I think it's the 14th of Jan until near the end of Feb, but I can put a link in the, would that be helpful? Can I use the chat? Can I put a link in the chat?
Yes, I can change the settings so you can chat to everybody. And I am going to just hand back over to Aviva, but firstly I just want to say thank you so much to Tash, to Sarah, to Rachel and Jennifer for all of your contributions tonight, and everybody for your questions. It's been such a fun and fascinating session, and I hope you've enjoyed it and felt that it's been, you know, as kind of lively as I have. So yeah, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. Yeah, over to
Thanks
you.
for having us. It was always a joy to talk about this.
Well, it was wonderful. And just before I finish up and introduce next week, so just to tell all the audience, Sarah, Rachel and Jennifer couldn't say too much about the film because they had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. But so you really will have to wait and see and watch it. But when we were chatting in advance, Rachel did tell me a tiny story about being on set with Colin Firth. So I don't know if you'd just like to share that before we finish, Rachel, because that I think you can tell everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Aviva. Yes. So Colin Firth came up with this absolutely wonderful throwaway line. Well, after making the King's Story, when I was talking to the Earl of Snowdon, which, yes, he delivered with, he said that, interestingly, the royal family had obviously blanked and not talked about the stammer and so on. And so the Earl of Snowdon, as a grandchild, knew nothing about it. And he was fascinated to realise that we actually, that, you know, this story was very much part of us and we were very familiar with it and what they were doing. We grew up in Granny and Grandpa's flat with the whole row. They had a row on their bookshelves of all the different translations of The Man Who Never Was. When they launched the body off the coast of Spain, knowing there was somebody in Spain who would be delighted to forward any information to the Germans, it was sent off with the boat with one oar, and one oar was kept, and that oar hung in the hallway of our grandparents' home. We did very much grow up with this story.
Well, thank you so much for sharing it with all of us, and we look forward to seeing the film, seeing the musical, Tash. I think you're going to get a whole load of new bookings. And just to say, if people want to find out a bit more, the January issue of Jewish Renaissance is going to explore the story a little bit further in terms of the film coming out. So do look at Jewish Renaissance too for my bit of marketing. And just to tell everyone, we're continuing with the film links for the next few weeks. And actually next week, we have a Q&A with the director of a documentary about Wilfrid Israel. So Wilfrid Israel was one of the architects of the Kindertransport, but until this documentary, he's really not received the credit and been recognised in the way that he should have done. His is also quite a tale of daring do, of spying. It's across 3 countries. It's not just Germany and England, but also he got people out to Israel, and there's a whole kibbutz and museum founded by the people that he rescued and saved. So Wilfrid Israel's a remarkable man, and unlike your Montague story, it's one that people don't know about to the same extent. What we're going to do to that is we're going to send out the link in advance, so please book early so you can watch the film. And then our session next Thursday will be a Q&A. And as well as having the director on, Jonathan Nir, we're also going to have him joined by Jonathan Oppenheimer, or should I say Jonathan Wilfrid Oppenheimer, because his mother named him for the man who saved her life. So we'll have him in conversation with Jonathan Nir and all of you. Thank you again to all of tonight's speakers, to the Lions Learning Project, and to Insiders Outsiders for co-curating with Jewish Renaissance, and a special thanks to Tash and the Montague family. Have a good evening, everyone.